Hi, everybody. Welcome back to EDBEAT. I'm April Cummings with Cayman Life TV, and this is Patrick Brendel from Cayman Current.
Hi,
Hey,
April. How are
Patrick.
you?
Man, I got the pink headphones on today, so I'm styling. I feel very fashionable,
Nice.
like a gamer, except I don't have the little, microphone thing. But, we do what we can to stay in touch with the young people, which is part of the focus of EDBEAT, of course, as always, as we cover education issues. Okay, I lied. Patrick covers education issues, and I talk about what Patrick's covering in Cayman Current.
Good segue, April.
I'm so talented. All right, so we have so much to talk about. We do, but let's go back because I missed an episode. I got snowed down. So let's go back just a tiny step and touch on Island Jobs first, which had a debut.
That's right. We've been celebrating the past week.
It was party time.
So on Friday, Friday 18th of May, was the debut of the first episode of Island Jobs at the Cayman Documentary Festival at Cayman Bay
March.
Cinema. Did I say May? Oh,
Yes, because you were ready for summer, like all good parents are.
Yes. Friday 18th March at the cinema, as I said, and yeah, it was good. It was a good experience. It was really cool to see our work on the episode on the big screen, on the silver screen, if you will. And I think it was received very well. I was kept my ear out for the boo birds, and I didn't hear any. I did hear some applause. So kudos to Kayla Young, who's the director of the film, and also to our production studio, Silver Palm Studio, and everybody who participated in it. And I just wanted to say thanks to the documentary festival, and especially Anna, who's been running it, and I know is a big logistical task for a small group of people to pull it off. And I think it went well. So we were very pleased.
Awesome. And that leads us nicely into our next subject.
Yes, so even though the first episode has debuted, that doesn't mean the news stops. So we'll be updating the documentary series up until the final cut, when we release all 5 episodes as well as the 90-minute feature-length documentary. So one of the points of update that we're doing is UCCI just received a $405,000 grant to train 50 unemployed. I got lost in the acronym from the RESIMBID program, which stands for Resilience, Sustainable Energy, and Marine Biodiversity. And I did check, and all the letters do line up in the acronym. But this is a European Union funded grant, particularly for Caribbean territories. So UCCI got $400,000, and they're going to use it to do a year-long training courses for 50 unemployed Caymanians in four fields, which are renewable energy, sustainable construction, information and communications technology, and tourism. And for anybody who's been aware of our Island Jobs documentary, it is exactly on these kind of career fields in the technical, vocational, education and training, and the STEM sectors. So we're really pleased to be able to catch up with Paul Puckering, who's the head of those programs at UCCI, to talk about the RESIMBID grant and what they're going to be using it for. And so we'll incorporate the interview with Paul into the documentary, and hopefully the plan is to get a short cut of the interview to put into the next episode of EDBEAT.
Woohoo!
So as I like to say, stay tuned. And don't touch that dial.
Do we even have dials anymore is the real question. So, a big boost for UCCI on this one, because it really does make it much easier to fund these kinds of programs. And, being intimately involved with Island Jobs, the need to find ways to make it easier. I don't mean the work has to be easier, but making it easier for people who are unemployed, students, people who really want to advance themselves in a different way than perhaps the conventional academic route. Funding like this makes all the difference.
Yes, I agree.
Well said.
And what I think is interesting about UCCI's approach to this is so to identify good candidates for these positions in the program, they're going to be working with WORK, so workforce occupation residency,
Opportunities, residency
opportunities,
team.
blah blah blah. These acronyms with WORK and also with the Chamber of Commerce. So I thought that was an interesting approach, and probably will be constructive to work with the public sector and the private sector, representing potential employees and potential employers to try to get the right people and studying the right things. And one thing Paul said is they hope 90% of the people who go through the program find employment. So that's a an ambitious benchmark,
It is.
but it, if you work along together, it should hopefully doable.
And it's not just the learning how to do the job component either, right? It's also, and I think maybe Michael Miles touched on this in the episode that folks have seen, so I'm not giving anything away. But it's not just learning the skills of the job; it's also learning how to be prepared to be in a workplace, in a work environment, whatever that may be. It's some of it's about learning how to manage yourself and the people around you professionally. And that's something that we assume people just are going to know how to do inherently, but that's not necessarily the case. And every work environment and culture may be different. So helping prepare people with the skills for that, in addition to learning the actual, here are the tasks and here's how you perform them in the work. I think that combination is really, really critical for success. So I wish them luck, and we'll kind of see at the end of the day how it works out.
Yep.
So I'm feeling hungry this morning. And if I were going to a number of government schools, I would know that tomorrow, all 3 meals a day. Okay, I exaggerated a little bit, but the expansion of the meal program is something that we didn't have a chance to talk about. That happened, 2 weeks ago, maybe?
Last Monday.
Wow, it's so long ago now to me. Time and space, they're mushing together.
Yeah, it's
So yeah,
May, practically May.
it's almost summertime, man. So the government school meal program was first announced a bit back. It was one of the kind of the big headlines that you and I talked about at the time, and they piloted it in a few places first, and primary schools in particular. But now it's been expanded to high schools as well. Ish.
Correct. Yeah, and so you get practically 3 meals. You get 2 meals and a snack.
See, I knew there
Uh,
was a three in there somewhere.
yeah, so 3 squares, and so it's been at the primary school level since the beginning of the school year in September, and now they just recently announced that they've rolled it out to the secondary schools as well, and that includes SciFec, and just to loop everything together, tie off all the loose ends. A Lighthouse School, which has primary and secondary, has been in it since the beginning as well. Um, and it's interesting to me with the timing of it because it was always, I don't want to say rolling target, but there was a learn as we go component to this. It's the first time we tried to do that. Cayman's tried to do this universal free meals. There's an array of different vendors that are operated by different entities, whether it's the PTA or a vendor that only has that one school, or maybe has contracts with several different schools. So they since the beginning they said, okay, we're going to do it at the primary school level. We're going to what works and what doesn't, and when we get a handle on it, we'll roll it out system wide. And I think from the beginning, Minister of Education Juliana O'Connor Connolly had said, I believe in the LA Parliament, that they wanted to do it in January to secondary schools. But when the purchase agreements, which are part of the budget documents, came out, they didn't anticipate the program being rolled out until next year for the secondary schools. So with the fact that it's been expanded in mid to late March, is within those two benchmark dates that were set. But I followed up with questions to the ministry on where exactly the funds are coming from, or how the budget process works. Like how are they going to pay for it for the rest of this year? And I'm still awaiting a response on that. And I just ask because it's a significant sum of money. So
Certainly.
the anticipated cost, I'm looking at my numbers. I don't have them all in my head. So the program was supposed to cost $3 million in the fall semester for the primary school, and then you can just basically double that for the high schools roughly. So if we're going half, if you're going like half of this, I'm getting confused between semesters and terms. But if you're
Yes.
doing it for half of this half of the
Oh,
school
I see
year,
what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
it'd be about $1.5 million
Right.
ish bucks. Just back of the envelope calculations for the remainder of the spring term. So to me, that's enough money to ask the question for how the budgeting process works.
Certainly. And I mean, it is also interesting to see whether it costs what they thought it would cost, and kind of it being the first time that something like this has been done on this scale here. And it is quite a few moving pieces of these too, as well, because you have multiple vendors and that sort of stuff. And
Right.
there were also some requirements about, at least I vaguely remember reading this bit about them having to meet certain criteria in terms of um, health and
Yep.
nutrition as well. So there is that to factor as well. My favorite deep fried chicken nuggets, with sugar on top, might not qualify for this program. So there's some of that I think they probably have had to juggle as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me how the program is set up, where they pay. It's kind of like the government says for every breakfast you serve, we'll give you $4, and it's based on how many meals they actually serve,
Hmm.
not how many they plan to serve.
Right.
So it's $4 for a breakfast, $5 for a lunch, $3 for a snack, and $4 for two drinks at the primary school level. And
Mhm.
then the numbers are in the ballpark. It's $7 for a lunch, for example, at the secondary school level as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the actual uptake on the program by the students has been.
It's hard to plan for that, though, isn't it? If you're the vendor, you know,
Right. Yeah.
how much food do I bring? you
Yeah.
know,
Well, and I know
um,
there was some kind of anecdotal reports of too much food
mhm.
going to waste at the beginning of the school year, which I think is attributable to just that, like it's trial and error.
Mhm.
And then who knows if the students and parents like it, then you'd expect more buy-in throughout the year,
Yeah,
and maybe if they'd rather bring their food from home, maybe you get a little less buy-in than
yeah,
in the other way. So you really don't know until you do it.
yeah. But it is hard to base it on who eats it as opposed to who might eat it, because you don't want to not bring enough food either. So, yeah. I am curious about the uptake as well. I mean, I have kids who are very picky eaters, right? They would like eat nothing as opposed to eat something that they didn't care for.
Ugh,
So yeah, for good times. The good times were had by all in this household. And
right.
allergies too, right? So you've got kids with allergies. That's another potential component. So yeah, I'm just curious overall. It's the planning and coordination and execution of a program like this that I find somewhat intriguing. I'm, wondering how it's going to work in the end, and also what the bottom line costs are going to be, because at the end of the day, it's about for me, it's, oh great, kids are getting fed, but it is public funds, so it's value for money that's a measure or a benchmark that has to be met. I don't know how you define that in this case, but I'm sure at some point the Office of the Auditor General will tell us.
Yeah, again, just anecdotally, because I like that word. Um, in the school, they don't want them to call us inspection reports, but in the inspectors' reports on their thematic visits to the schools this
Letters.
spring, almost universally contain statements from the staff talking about the positive effects of the school meals program and how it's helped with attendance in
Interesting.
terms of kids that they maybe keep an eye on in terms of, we think this kid might be at risk to miss a lot of school, that these kids especially aren't missing as much school as they thought they might. and maybe it's drawn to the fact that they are getting better nutrition every day, and so are getting more engaged in school. Maybe getting the meals at school is a reason that their parents will push them extra to get into school.
Mm-hmm.
But they're saying anecdotally it's a positive effect on attendance.
Yeah, which goes back to what Stacy from Feed Our Future was saying back when we interviewed her some time ago, that the link between nutrition and performance in school, and I may be stretching a bit, but better fed kids, better nutrition, they're more likely to do well, and that's a good day. So you mentioned the thematic visits, which I don't want to bury a really good story you did too. But there's an area in here that I think was interesting that deals with the dual enrollment program at UCCI. So I thought this was interesting because it was the related to COVID and the delayed CXC exams. So they didn't get the scores in time, so some students ended up in a program that maybe wasn't the right one for them. Could you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yes. This is why I spend so much time reading, getting all the receipts and reading all these reports, because, sometimes in addition to this kind of holistic analysis of the system that comes out with it, you do get these little gems or story nuggets that pop out. And so for me, this little gem came out on the inspector's report about UCCI, which is interesting in itself because, to my knowledge, this is the first time that a school inspector has visited the public university. And obviously, because they're dealing with kids who are older than the mandatory education age, right? So usually they don't fall into that inspection regime historically.
Right.
But for this time, they chose to look at UCCI because they do cater to serve students who are in a dual enrollment program, which is where kids who are at SciFec take university level classes at UCCI. So that was the crack in the door that allowed the inspectors to slip in. But anyway,
If you will.
they went to go look at UCCI in the context specifically of the DE program. And so what the inspector said is that, just like you said, is COVID delayed the CHC exams last year. And so the scores didn't come in time to help, I guess, assist or inform the decision on which students may be eligible or right for the dual enrollment program. So instead, they went using the metric they had, which was predicted grades from the teachers. And so they, based on these predicted grades, they assigned students to various programs, including the DE program. But then when the actual scores came out, they didn't match. They didn't always match up with the predicted scores. So I'm going to use, looks like I can look at their language, is in retrospect, the predicted grades were not always accurate, resulting in students being inappropriately allocated to the dual enrollment program. And so after the fact, they figured out that maybe some students they wouldn't have placed in the program were placed in the program. And then the department and the Ministry of Education decided not to move any students out of the program.
So at the end of the day here, it will be whether those students, whether they were appropriately or inappropriately allocated, it'll be ultimately how they do in the context of the program, which has both positives and negatives. If I fail because I'm not ready for something yet, that's extremely disappointing to a young person.
Yes.
It's demoralizing. And at the other, end of the spectrum, exhilarating if you do better than you were expected. I mean, there's some kids who just don't test well, particularly stuff like the CXC. It makes my head hurt, man. It really does. But ultimately, there are people who do not test well, and so they may do fine in a conventional, post-secondary universe, because the testing might be a little bit different in scale and scope. But yeah, I mean, just one of those interesting problems that came as a result of COVID. And it's interesting how the prediction and the scores don't always add up as well. I know I find the whole system interesting anyway because it's a challenge. I
Yeah,
went
and
through my kid's book.
generally,
I was like, wow, this is serious work here.
yeah,
For
and generally they've found, and this isn't just in Cayman, this is in the Caribbean and also in the UK, that the teachers' predicted grades tend to be higher than the actual scores.
mm,
Uh, I don't, and that being said, I don't know if this is the case here.
yeah,
They don't specify, but it could also be that maybe some of the predicted grades were lower than the actual results, and therefore they would have been put in a different program
mhm,
than. I mean,
yeah. We don't, yeah, but
I don't
it's
know.
still interesting COVID problem to be dealing with, and hopefully there's enough support for students in either capacity to help work through it. I guess that's a good question to ask, at the end of the program.
Yeah, just to kind of round off how UCCI did in their first visit, the inspectors didn't note any serious concerns. They're focused on two specific areas. One is like health and well-being of staff and students, which is basically most of it is dominated by how are you dealing with COVID, and the other one is leadership. So for UCCI, they got good marks in how they're managing with COVID, with the hand sanitization and social distancing and uh, virtual learning options. Um, I did think it was interesting that the inspector said that the UCCI had experienced issues with the dual enrollment students um, returning from COVID-related absence, and in
Mm,
terms of either not returning or maybe not doing as well in the live lectures at first. So what they did is they said, if one of these DE students has a COVID-related absence, you got to come back and do face-to-face classes first before we let you avail yourselves of the voluntary online learning option.
that's interesting. Yeah, I wonder what the difference is. I mean, there is in person, it's harder for me to, I don't know, do laundry while listening to a lecture, right? In reality. But at the same time, the issues of being person to person can be, I'm fidgety, right? So having me in your classroom, it's just an annoyance because I'm scribbling the whole time, or I'm moving. So I'm just curious as to, and I suppose it's something we could look at another time, but about the pros and cons of just in terms of how people learn, whether there are pros and cons for specific learning types, and overall who does better. I don't know, just nosy.
Yeah, and they've been teachers here have been saying that some students have been thriving in the
Mhm.
online learning environment, and some students struggle with it. As you said, it depends on the kind of person you are.
Yeah. Yes, or what time of day it is, or whether I had coffee or not, or so many things. But and I, because of the multitude of children, and you have just as many as I have, they are different, and some do better in certain environments than others. So I suppose that may be a factor. But I do know that if you're trying to get me back on track at the age of 16 or 17 or so, you probably do have to have me in the room because, I will secretly be playing Tetris. We didn't really have under the, you know,
Tetris, wow.
yeah, I'm that old. And we didn't have phones. So,
Yeah,
or Game Boys or any of those things. So I
yeah.
would have
You're
been
playing
doodling.
Tetris on graphing paper.
Yeah, I would have been writing it out.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, just going on to more reports. They tackled the other end of the dual enrollment program, which is SciFec. They examined all the programs there, and kind of the interesting point for me is they're focusing on some second chance exams for the CXCs, and
Mm,
they've observed some learning loss in the area of mathematics. So the students are farther behind than might be expected. So SciFex provided additional support in these areas outside school hours. but a number of students weren't taking advantage of the additional support.
Yeah.
And reasons cited were lack of transportation and family commitments.
Mm-hmm.
And so what SciFEC's done is they've asked for additional transportation from the Department of Education. So it's one of these areas where the school has offered this additional support after school hours, on the weekends, and not everybody they hope is showing up is able to or is willing to.
Yeah, yeah, and that is a real challenge sometimes, particularly when some children, which aren't children anymore, have other responsibilities within their households and families that it's
Well,
expecting
and they're
them
getting
to.
they're older students too.
Right. That's what I'm
So some
saying.
of them
So
may
it's
have jobs that
yeah,
family
exactly.
depends on.
And so I think you have to bear in mind too that there are other things going on sometimes besides they're going to school.
Yeah. And another highlight from SciFEC is, and I don't see this often in the reports, is the inspectors noted that the physical facilities are outdated and in some instances in need of repair.
Yeah.
So much as this is what they said, the center's an old site and it requires significant ongoing maintenance, fixing leaking roofs, dealing with termites, and closing rooms due to air conditioning failure.
Yeah.
So for the building to be so in need of TLC that it actually impacts the delivery of the education. I don't know if I've seen that in any other schools.
Yeah.
And I will note that,
I haven't seen it either in the reports of the past.
and as many people know, SciFEX, I think in the original John Gray
Yeah.
site,
Yeah.
and it's like musical chairs, or maybe it's like Pez. So part of the new John Gray big high school campus project is the work SciTech is now is going to be bulldozed, be made make way for new playing fields, and
Hmm.
then so then the current John Gray site, those kids are going to leave and move into the new John Gray. The current John Gray site is going to be renovated, and SciFEC is going to be one of among several entities that are going to move into the renovated current John Gray site. So they do have a capital plan to deal with the fact the building's really old and kind of falling apart.
Yeah, I was just I took myself online for a minute. I was trying to find I thought you had it on your site, but I couldn't find it that fast. That showed kind of the whole layout of everything from the
Yeah.
diagrams and stuff. And so it is, soon come, if you will. And I haven't been back to John the new site since the graduation, I think. But
Mhm.
we did get sort of a quick tour of it from the principal of the new site, the new components, and it's looking really good. It's amazing, and for the SciFEC students, soon come. This things will be better, but the problem is it's probably not going to happen for the next 5 minutes. So it's a bit of suffering through. And I did go to SciFEC recently to shoot a Classroom of the Month there, which is not aired yet, but they were even things like needing to plug equipment into outlets. There are only certain outlets you could use, because you didn't want to trip out the system. So they
Yeah.
are dealing with more than just, gee, I have to teach my class, or the students, they're managing around an aging facility, which also, it just adds a bit of extra stress, especially if it's raining. But yet, I got to say, the kids I met were great. They had great energy. They were enthusiastic about the stuff they were learning. It was kind of cool. I was really impressed, and I thought, they too deserve a world class building to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, because we
Because
talk a lot about the current John Gray and how in need of updating or fumigation or abandonment it is, but keep in mind SciFEC is even older than that. So it is it's a big project they're doing at John Gray. Um,
Oh, and I forgot to mention, I wish I thought of this before the episode, but I also Saturday went to the Minds Inspired, I think it's called the First Tech Robotic Challenge. And it's the first one of these that I've been to since COVID, to be honest. And it was amazing, Patrick. It was like, I don't know, nerd's delight for me. But, um, it was just so cool to see both public schools and private schools competing together. They were in teams where you could get paired up with one of the other schools.
Hmm.
So, and you had to, strategize, pay attention to where the strengths and weaknesses were of the other team's robots in conjunction with yours in order to complete this obstacle challenge. I think it was called, I feel like Freight Frenzy. That was it. It was called Freight Frenzy. I mean, this took a full day of these for these students too, right? They were there early in the day, putting, fine tuning their robots. There were, both boys and girls, different age range. I think John Gray might have a younger and older team as well working
Hmm.
together. It was really kind of cool to just see it all. The kind of competitive spirit that they had was great, but they also had to learn how to collaborate with each other because at the end, you pick someone from another school, another team from the other school, and you compete with them as well. So there's the one where they pair you up, and then there's
Yep.
one where you have to pick. So it's more than just my robot's great and it's going to kick behind. You have to also pay attention to what other people's strengths and weaknesses are, and kind of figure out how to collaborate with them. So someone you competed with in round one may be the person that's on your team at the end of the game, right? So it was very, very interesting, great to watch, and just kind of an exciting energy about it all. At one point, I felt like I was at a football game. There was the crowd roared. It was great stuff, and so I'm really looking forward to sharing the Classroom of the Month on that one with folks as soon as it's done, because it's good. We have a couple others too that are in the process of being edited and stuff, and I'll make sure to do a better job of sharing them here on EDBEAT as they happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And they recently did the sea perch
Yes,
competition as well, which is the one where the robots compete underwater.
that one's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did.
It's good to see things, events like this get cranking up again. Hope on what we hope is the tail end of the pandemic.
I sure hope so, man, because it was just so great to see people together again. It was really nice. And for someone who swings between extrovert and introvert, for me to be delighted means that it's been a long time coming. It was really nice. All right, so, geez, we are running close to out of time. Is there anything we missed that we need to touch today?
Yeah. Just kind of wrapping up with the inspectors, the reports from the inspectors, just a general status update. So they were planning on visiting 31 schools this term. We've now had stories on 24 of the 31 schools. So we're nearing the end of the tunnel on this. And so when we're writing individual stories on each of the reports. And at the end, we'll do some comprehensive stories. And also, the OES is going to put out an official system-wide report based on their observations from all the schools. So
Oh,
that's
good.
what I'm excited about. Uh, after,
Reports to pour through and analyze.
yeah,
Yay.
yeah, and then the other thing is we have a if people remember the serious issue, serious topic is the reports of alleged misconduct towards students at Red Bay Primary School that were announced last May, speaking of the
Mhm.
month of May, in May 2021. So it's been more than 10 months since that investigation started, and that involves police and the Department of Children and Family Services. So for me, this is, yeah, a serious investigation,
Absolutely.
just based on who's involved in it. They've been investigating it for 10 months. And as of last Monday, the investigation is still ongoing, according
Mhm.
to the Ministry of Education. And as people might recall, that when the investigation started, staff at the school who were reported to be involved were uh, relocated from schools until the investigation is completed,
That's a
which
long time.
more than 10 months later still hasn't happened. Since last May, Ryan Dale has been the acting principal at Red Bay Primary. serving in place of the longtime principal, Vicki Frederick. And he's, as of the last, Red Bay Primary was visited by inspectors recently. Ryan Dale, still the acting principal. Investigation still ongoing. No substantive updates from the government since the investigation started. Every couple months, I send him the same query, and the questions I ask are: is the investigation still ongoing? Answer is always yes. Second one is, if the investigation is concluded, what are the findings and what actions we're taking? That's always soon come, or TBD. And importantly to me is has the file, which is like when the investigators come in, they build a case file, and then they submit it to prosecutors, who then make a decision on whether or not to go forward with any charges. Has the file been submitted to prosecutors, or will it? Again, because the investigation is still ongoing, that question is moot. So for me, going on more than 10 months on an investigation of allegations that were reported time to be very public, happen, involving a lot of people, involving staff being moved out of schools to somewhere else. It is troubling that this has been going on for almost a year now, almost a whole full school year later now, without a resolution in any direction. How long does the investigation take?
Right.
and that's not saying like not implying guilt at all. And
No. It's just resolution. It's resolution to an issue.
And not even going through any system. So you say the investigation's still ongoing, so you're still looking into it. You haven't decided whether or not this is something criminal or something administrative. It apparently hasn't reached that stage yet. We haven't had the file submitted to prosecutors yet, if the investigation is still ongoing. And so it hasn't even started moving through the other stages in the process. If, as they say, the investigation itself is still ongoing.
Right. So the question really is, aside from this specific instance, if you think about it, it is, should there be, some sort of time frame in which things need to be resolved? I know I understand that there may be challenges with that, because you don't want to not follow appropriate process in terms of an investigation, right? So I throw that caveat out there. But at the same time, if I'm the person who's accused of something, you kind of want it resolved at some point, right? Particularly if you're innocent of said thing. It's just that it's a long duration to be waiting for something to be resolved, whether it's to say there's not enough evidence to go forward with anything or not. And I don't even mean at the police stage. I just mean at the school system stage. So that definitely, it's a question that I'm sure that parents of the kids involved would like an answer to as well.
Yes.
Not to mention,
but just so people know, the current is one of the things is we're laser focused on education. We're not going to forget about this, and we're going to keep asking the questions on a regular basis until the situation is resolved.
Yeah, as a good reporter does.
Yeah, and one with calendar alerts.
Man, technology. Some things are good about it, and reminders are one of them. If only I would remember to set the reminders. But that's why we have you. And Patrick blushes nicely. All right, you guys, thank you so much. I must go and prepare my homework, since I am currently taking a class as well. It's not a high school class. Yep. I am, for the first time in quite some time, I'm taking it's a management course called ILM. And it's British style, and I managed to squeak through with American style for almost everything but primary school level. So there's a whole learning curve involved in said course. The language is a bit different. The approach is a bit different. The content is the same, which I find interesting. But I'm having to not only learn, but learn how to express what I've learned in a different way. So
Hmm.
it's very challenging for someone at my age, but I'm also enjoying it a great deal. It's good fun. So yeah, that said, I have homework like everybody else.
Well, I'm looking forward to your viewpoint commentary on your experience that will be published on the Cayman Current.
Absolutely. And remember, my parents, American style education, right? They started ICCI here. And even though I went to Savannah Primary, then I switched to American schools in Cayman. So, and then I've done some a college/university in the US and here. So this would be sort of be my first grown up experience with a different style of learning, I guess. I mean, it's not even learning, it's the how you demonstrate what you've learned. So good times are being had by all. I'm reading, writing, and I will definitely have a perspective and an opinion after this is over. All right, thanks everybody. As always, check out caymancurrent.org for the almost as good as my commentary on everything on education. No, I'm kidding. Cayman Current is really a great source for everything education in Cayman. Patrick and his crew do a fantastic job of staying on top of things. And Patrick, we haven't mentioned in a bit, but I also like the thing where you talk about kind of other things that are going on around the region and world in education.
Yes.
Particularly useful with COVID stuff right now too, because I'm most interested in the mask stuff, just because you're seeing it change in other places, and so seeing it in the context of the classroom and education, I can go to Cayman Current and see what countries have done what yet, and so that's a great resource that I think you provide that I don't see anyplace else. So good times.
Thanks, April.
Thanks, Patrick. All right, everybody, have a great one. We'll see you soon.
Bye.